Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Sarah Sheehan has joined me in the studio today. Sarah began and spent the first half of her career in HR people roles at prominent companies such as SiriusXM, Coach, and the Gilt Group. Whilst at Gilt, she took a leap and made a complete career switch, moving into sales, where she grew to lead a national sales team and drove an impressive $60 million in revenue. It is in this role that she started to understand the importance of understanding and addressing individual needs to drive performance and cultivate positive team dynamics. With her extensive background sitting at the intersection of people, leadership, and tech, Sarah was inspired to launch Bravely in 2017, a coaching and development platform designed to support employees and supercharge their development through one-to-one coaching and training programs. Bravely's proprietary and unique data insights help organizations develop people strategies to achieve company goals and foster a healthier, more inclusive workplace culture. Through Bravely, Sarah is fulfilling her mission of transforming the workplace by empowering individuals, particularly women and underrepresented minorities, to gain the confidence and skills they need to thrive at work. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. I'm excited to be here.
I know that we're both coughing today with cold, so we're going to try and get through this. But it's lovely to have you here, and it'd be lovely for the audience to understand. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It'd be lovely for the audience to understand a little bit more about you as a person, both outside of work and in work, and what the current focus is.
Great. So current focus, like you said, I'm the CEO and founder of Bravely, and we are the first coaching platform to provide equitable access to entire populations across organizations. So what I mean by that is traditionally coaching was offered to the most senior level executives within organizations, typically the C-suite. We've seen over the course of the last couple of years or decade, it cascade down to director level, even manager level. But wasn't exactly reaching the most, what I would describe as marginalized, or the individuals or employees within organizations that don't typically get the investment in the resources that they need to get to the next level. And if the goal of an organization is to increase their diversity, to have more representation at senior levels of their company, they need to invest in the people at the lower levels. So that was the foundation for us founding Bravely. How do we offer coaching at scale so everyone at every level has access to what we know is a transformational resource? And that's what we set out to do almost 7 years ago, and we accomplished it. We work with companies like the Zillow Group, Pinterest, Etsy, the New York Times, the NBA, Autodesk, global companies where every employee at every level has access to coaching. And it's been remarkable to watch the impact that this resource can have on everyone from an individual contributor who is in their first job all the way to senior level executives inside an organization. And I think we've just proven how important it is to make sure that we're investing at all levels in companies. So that's professionally what I'm have been focused on for a long time and hopefully will continue to be focused on for many years into the future. It's certainly my passion. And personally, I am living in Charlottesville, Virginia. I was a pandemic transplant, thought I was leaving for 2 weeks, living in New York City, and did not come back to the place that I thought I would, which has transparently been a very difficult transition for me. I think a lot of my identity was wrapped up in being a New Yorker. So it's been quite difficult for me. My partner, who was born and raised in the city, has had no problem integrating into the suburban lifestyle or living in a more remote place. But I've struggled quite a bit. And I'm the mother to 2 beautiful girls, Mabel, who's 4, Alyssa, who's 11. And I like to think that everything I'm doing, even professionally, is for them. My children are biracial, and I think a lot about how I want the world and the workplace at large to be a more welcoming place for them. Certainly by the time they enter the workforce. But everything I do is meant to hopefully create a more equitable world for them to live in.
And I'm interested to know which of your girls persuaded you to get a dog.
We were just talking about this, that we have a 2-year-old Labradoodle. His name is Brooklyn. And he is very mischievous, to say the least. And it was my greatest joy to give this puppy to these children. And lately, I've been thinking a lot about how it's my biggest regret as well, as we still struggle to house train this dog. He is also an escape artist. So it's literally embarrassing at this point how many texts we get from the neighbors in our community letting us know that Brooklyn's running around again or in their backyard. So
Love
a big piece of my daily life is getting in the car.
Yeah. Well, I've got we got a Cavapoo here, so it's a cross between a King Charles Cavalier and a poodle, but very similar to Labradoodles. And after 5 years of having him, he's great. So I know that as yours gets older, Brooklyn's going to be great. I know that. Now, we've talked about your children, which is important, but what about your own childhood experiences, Sarah, in terms of how did they shape your early leadership style? Just tell us a bit about that.
I was thinking about this question. I was telling you I don't prepare a lot because I never want to give a canned answer. And I was actually talking about my children. I was reminded of, growing up, my father was a lawyer, and he mainly did workers' compensation, and he did a lot of employment law. And for the majority of my childhood, he was representing women and people of color who had been discriminated against at work. And so I grew up with a deep sense an understanding of the inequity that existed, in particular in the workplace. And my dad my parents were divorced when I was 7, and they split custody. So they lived very close to each other, and they are still very friendly. Like, they come and stay at my house now, and spend time with my children. And it's a gift that they gave me that they were able to stay connected in that way. But I still split my time between their houses growing up. So I would spend 6 months with my mother and 6 months with my father. And my father just integrated me into his life, basically. So I would be going to the law library with him on the weekends. He would have me looking up case law. This was before the days of the internet. So I'd be literally in a card catalog trying to find cases to support whatever trial was up next for him. But it was truly formative for me because he was on a nightly basis, like at the dinner table, which was usually like Pizza Hut delivery for us. But, he was trying those cases in front of me. I was a part of this world, which I think allowed me to, again, like see the realities. But from a leadership perspective, it helped me think about seeing things from every angle. So that's a huge piece of practicing law. In my dad's case, he was a trial attorney. So he was always challenging me to think about, what is the other side going to say in response to this? Or, what do you think this other person is thinking as you're explaining things out loud? And I think that is something I haven't ever talked about, but truly shaped who I am as a person, certainly who I am as a leader. I think a lot about the other person and the different angles of every situation, which has served me well for a lot of different reasons, but I think is critical when you're in a role where you're making decisions every day and where you're not just considering business implications, but the implications on people as well.
Yeah, I love that. And what I'm also interested in then is how that then informed as you grew more mature and obviously led larger numbers of people, how some of that wasn't serving you. For example, with me, I remember because my dad worked away a lot in the Middle East when I was young, about 15, 16, and my mother had a nervous breakdown and I was there as the eldest boy in the house to hold things together. That at the time, even though I didn't know, it was affecting the way I showed up. I had to be resourceful and resilient and maintain control and almost cut off my emotions at times, which didn't serve my relationships later in life. So what was it for you that you can look back on now and say, even though you had that kind of childhood, which was very informed in terms of your leadership, when do you notice some of those things maybe impacting you a little bit, particularly in relationships from a leadership perspective?
Yeah. So I also think that, that's definitely something that translated in a positive way to my professional growth, personal growth. But I'm also, my father's someone that absolutely told me that like I could do and be anything I wanted to be. But I'm the only daughter. I have older brothers. It's, at that point, I'm 47 years old. I was still raised in an environment that was predominantly focused on the patriarchy still, like that men sort of dominated. And I think while I had a very strong and loving relationship with my father, that was still pervasive in the work that he did, even representing women and people of color. It was, I think that's something that stayed with me in my childhood that I was facing throughout my early career and beyond, was just this, I was often acquiescing to my brothers my whole life, who I love dearly. One of my brothers is a CEO and I go to him a lot for guidance and support. But when I arrived in the workplace, there still weren't a lot of examples of female leaders for me to really get mentorship from or look up to. And so that was definitely something that I was dealing with on a daily basis. When I moved to New York, I like to joke that when I started working at Sirius, if you looked at an organizational chart, I had the lowest role on the org chart. So I was the administrative assistant to the mailroom and facilities department. And it took me so much effort to get this job because they kept telling me I was overqualified for it. And I somehow convinced them that I really needed the job and to give it to me. But what best thing that ever happened to me, it was the most magical place for me to work, but I was still honestly, I had to climb the ladder, kicking and screaming. It felt like it was a greased ladder that I was climbing. But I was facing every day what I would describe as a workplace that was not supportive of women that were outspoken. I had to play a role, and I knew that really quickly. And I figured out like how to do both. But it was quite challenging for me, going into a corporate environment where I think I was being judged a lot by my looks versus the work that I was doing. Just to get right into it, Andrew.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I love it, love it. So let's build on that a little bit. So as we get older, what we learn is, even though what you said is absolutely true at that time, it's the way we respond to that, isn't it? Which I know is what you're referring to, as we mature and learn about ourselves, which then enables us to grow even more, because we can't change how people judge us. But what we can do is be kind to ourselves and be proud of who we are in that sense. So tell us a bit more about how you adapted over time as you grew older and actually learned to, manage yourself more effectively in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, in one of the roles that I was in, I was literally the only female in the room. Practically 100% of the time, I was tasked with or asked to, and it was very exciting for me because at the time, again, I was like lowest person on the totem pole. I was given an opportunity to manage a construction project for this very large organization. I knew nothing about construction. I was like, absolutely. I had to learn about so many things and truly upskill myself and get an understanding of architecture, building compliance, construction, how we work with our own, New York, every building has, a management department. And so I was working with these different stakeholders, architects, contractors, building management, all of whom are men. And I had to figure out how to earn their respect, because from the onset, it was really the challenge for me was that I felt like I was being objectified and not in like an outward way. But it was just the way of the world, quite frankly, then. It was like you walk into a room and everybody's turning around and saying something which is like astonishing to even say that right now, but it was absolutely my lived experience, like knowing that like what I was wearing was probably being talked about or, likely wouldn't happen on the same level in today's world, thank God. But I'm grateful for it because it just emboldened me to sort of like prove myself, even though it's completely unacceptable. It was just what you had to deal with. And I was able to become, I think, the center of each of those stakeholders. Like no one would ended up not wanting to talk to one another because there was a lot of conflict and challenge associated with this project. And it was over like many years. And I became the center, where I could actually get an answer for the CEO of this very large company when he couldn't get it. And that's when I really started to understand the power of influence, that if you are authentic and you show up every day and you do your best work and you make the lives of other people easier, that you will earn their respect. And then ultimately that turns into your ability to influence them. And that was just a huge turning point for me to start to understand my own power. And that it didn't have to come through like what I was wearing or if I was wearing heels or if, like all of that definitely plays a part, in the persona that you're projecting to the world when you're working in a corporate environment. But, that was just an incredible experience for me because I then knew that I was capable of so much more.
And that leads us on to 2017. I'd love to understand so the audience can really connect with, what was the major difference from working in a corporate environment, being very successful, growing the $60 million revenue and really engaging with the people side, and then deciding to set up your own business, which had a purpose, which had a mission, a lot of energy from you. Talk to us about the differences and the challenges of establishing the business back in 2017.
It's just a lot. The truth is that a lot of the same principles that I'm describing, they're still present when you're going out and you're raising money from venture capitalists, as an example. Like, you're going into a room and it's all about, like, how do I gain these people's respect, trust, and then turn that into influencing them to believe that I'm the right person to build this company. And so I think a lot of the same principles applied. And, a lot of the stories that we would tell in these meetings were very much aligned with, like, what I just described. Like, if in my early career as a young woman, if I had had a coach or a resource like Bravely, it would have been so incredibly helpful to navigate the challenges, the difficulties, the politics that I was facing on a daily basis. And it took a lot of, trial and error and, in some cases, pain to get there. And I was lucky to acquire mentors and advocates for me along the way. And I think that a lot of that came with privilege. And so when I was out there pitching Bravely and forming the company, like, those stories and the basis for which we were founding the company was about, like, what would happen if the people that ordinarily were the most marginalized or didn't have access to this, what if they did? How could that change the trajectory of their professional lives and impact the companies ultimately and their performance? And so I think just what was, there's a lot that goes into building a company. Like, you're interviewing your first hires, and that is probably the most critical thing in terms of, setting your company up for success. But working in corporate America over the years, and then, transferring into, like, more sales environments, it's like, it's like you have a toolkit, and along the way, I feel like every job I had, starting at the bottom and working my way up, I just gathered something critical that enabled me to found and build my company. Those guys that I was describing, the contractors and, the architects, and these became some of my greatest friends, that were day one, making, like, comments under their breath around me. Like, they're still people I keep in contact with to this day, that I have a lot of respect and admiration for, and vice versa. And so that doesn't change, over time. It's just, it gets, the way that you work and what you pick up along the way, you build upon it. And when we got to the point of founding Bravely, it was really about, can our message resonate? Like, is what we're building, does it add value? Can I convince people to take a chance on me? Again, I feel like that's just, like, the story of my life is, along the way, I've been asking people to take a chance on me. And the same was true when we were first out there selling Bravely. We had no real evidence other than just our belief that this could change people's lives and change the cultures of organizations.
I love that. And I love your enthusiasm and your passion. And I see this in a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders. But there's also those darker moments and those moments where negativity does get to us. And many of us have our own coping strategies to keep those at bay. I don't think we ever make good decisions from a place of judgment or being negative. So just share with the audience how you maintain that positivity when you are feeling negative, feeling judgmental, feeling judged. What kind of coping strategies do you have?
I joke a lot with another female friend of mine. We'll call each other and, I'll be having a good day. And I'll say, I'll call you in 2 days and I'm ready to like jump off the ledge. Because it truly is like every couple of days that it changes. So, I have to just give myself a lot of grace, quite frankly, because it's extraordinary how much doubt can creep into your mind as the leader of a company. Every interaction that you have every day can call into question whether you're making the right decision or not. And the grace comes via acceptance that this isn't going to change. So rather than trying to convince myself that I'm just going to miraculously stop questioning my decisions or that I'm not going to be impacted by what another person says or challenges, I just accept that this is part of the job. And that's not something I think that I consciously did for a long time. And just having that awareness has helped me quite a bit, so that I don't react, so that I don't go into the spiral. It's like reminding myself, oh yeah, this is what it is. It's like a hellscape of good days and bad days. And, sometimes they're one after another or within the hour. But first and foremost, I think it's just having that awareness that this is part of it. It can feel really challenging, but also coupled with what a privilege to be able to be in the role that I'm in. When I was a little girl, I always wanted to live in New York. And I had this dream of, being a powerful businesswoman one day. And I don't know if it is exactly translated to what it looked like in my mind as a child, but it's just a complete privilege to be able to lead other people to, I always joke that they're the boss of me. And I truly still feel that way after years and years after, quote unquote, managing people. I learned so much every day from the people that I get to work with. And so making sure that I balance that in my mind, is just a requirement. And then, there are other things that I just have to do to reset. Like, I'm a mom. I don't get a lot of time to myself. Sometimes just sitting in the car, I'll go to like the grocery store or something, and then I will like sit in the garage for 15 minutes. And I just know like, this is what I need right now. I need a 15-minute, like listening to a podcast in the car by myself. And my kids will eventually come out and be like, what are you doing? I try to meditate. I don't get to do that as often. Well, not get to. I don't do that as often as I want. But when I do, it does give me a ton of space in my brain. And it sounds kind of cliche because I think everybody is like on the meditation bandwagon. But for me, I'm somebody that's probably like undiagnosed ADHD. Like I'm constantly just, my brain never shuts down. And so doing things like meditation, I do take a lot of baths, because it's like my shutdown. It's almost impossible for me to shut down. So I have to orchestrate a shutdown.
And it's really interesting. I saw a report the other day that the
I remember what it was.
Yeah, no, you did. Yeah, no, you did. But I also saw a report the other day that there's such a large waiting list now for diagnoses of ADHD for leaders who have communicated as you've communicated, that they suspect that might be present in the sense of how they are and how they've showed up and what enables them to focus, on a lot of things as well. So, I think it's a really interesting comment, and us being aware and then trying to get present and slow things down. I think it's very important for many leaders. So we're coming towards the end of our time, Sarah, but there's a couple of questions I've still got to ask you. So the first one is, there's going to be many people in the audience watching and listening to this who can really relate to your story in terms of the childhood experience you had of a a breakup with your parents, and also then this mission that came to you to actually live a life of purpose, and doing that by setting your own business after being in corporate. So anyone out there listening, what advice would you offer to leaders now who can relate to your story? They want to live a dream which maybe was cultivated back when they were younger and they're not living it yet. What advice would you give them?
My best advice always is to understand your strengths and lean into them. I spent so much of my life and my career beating myself up for the things that I wasn't strong in, or comparing myself to someone and saying, I need to learn how to do a VLOOKUP in a spreadsheet. And no, I think it's actually pretty easy, but I do not need to know how to do those things. I can do them. I've learned how to do them, but that's not my superpower. That's not my strength. And I think it all plays into this idea of insecurity, imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it. And it's debilitating. I think it's like, to me, that's an epidemic in leaders, people in general. Like my grandmother used to tell me, if you knew how little people actually thought about you, you'd stop worrying about them. And I love that she said that to me. I was very young when she said it, but it stayed with me over time because, we've got to understand, how can I have an impact? And that comes from what you're good at. It comes from your gift, and you want to hone that rather than try and build up your deficiencies, in my opinion. So that's my biggest piece of advice is just, always act from a place of integrity, because that's your reputation. You can sell $30 million in revenue, but if you don't have integrity, that's what will follow you around. People will remember that about you. So, being authentic, always coming from a place of integrity, and then understanding your strengths and lean into them.
And linked into that, many organizations in the past were very much focusing on, as you say, weaknesses of individuals and therefore trying to fix them or improve them. I think there's a lot more evidence, and certainly organizations are doing this now, to really understand where the strengths lie, where people's energy naturally lies in terms of the kind of activities they want to be involved in, and helping to shape organizations, department functions so that energy can just flow effortlessly. I love that when that happens in an organization. So I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, it's that dreaded performance review where somebody's coming in and saying, you're terrible at this. What if we all just said, yeah, I know. Probably not going to get better at it either. Having that self-awareness, I think, is just beautiful. It's powerful.
I agree. Let's look to the future now, Sarah. So I know that you said you want to continue doing what you're doing, but obviously it's going to be at a different scale as well as you become more successful. So tell us a bit more about the next 5 to 10 years in terms of what you're going to be in service of, and how can people collaborate with you to make this a reality, and how can they contact you if they want to do that?
Yeah, I want to continue to help develop every person within an organization. And we understand deeply at Bravely, the challenges associated with that. People, organizations, they don't have unlimited budgets to invest in everyone at the same level. So at Bravely, we will continue to develop products that meet the needs of individuals, but also the organizations who they work for. But we are human-centric. There's tons of talk about AI, like that will absolutely be integrated into what we do at Bravely. But I always want to, stay centered around that human connection, because it's so critical, I think, to our development personally and professionally. And so figuring out, how we continue to scale learning, scale professional development, in ways that, still connect people to another person so that they can feel supported, that they can feel heard. That's the future of Bravely. We already have such just mind-blowing impact. I start my day reading the responses from employees, who are getting coaching via our platform. And it's just like, it makes me cry, honestly. No exaggeration, because when you are stuck and you don't really see a path forward, work is where we spend all of our time. It is where we get a lot of our sense of self. It's where we derive those feelings of, worthiness, quite honestly. And if you're stuck and you don't have a support system, and you think about the most marginalized people in the world, they often don't come to work with networks of people to help them navigate the politics, the challenges, the understanding of how things work. And just having the ability to be that resource and safe space for people is total privilege to be able to do this work every day. I know that everyone that works with me feels the same way, because all we have to do is, open up the feedback every morning to be reminded of it.
Excellent. Well, Sarah, I really appreciate you sharing your experiences with the audience out there today. I know that many of them would have gained inspiration to really just look at their own lives, how they're leading themselves, both personally, professionally, but also how they might lead others differently as well. I love your perspective of seeing somebody else's perspective that you learned from your father. I think everyone out there will be able to resonate with what you've shared with them, and hopefully have a look at Bravely to see if it can also help them as well. So thanks again, Sarah, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. This was fun.
Thanks, and goodbye to everyone, and see you soon. Excellent. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.